welcome back, hopefully, to part 2 of this series, How to Make Your Yearbook a Real Storybook. Now, hopefully, first off, you watch part 1, right? Don't try to cheat and jump ahead. No. If you didn't do that, stop me right here. Turn off the video. Go back to part 1. We have several important activities. Now, hopefully you did those. And now the question is, now what? All right, we've got a list, hopefully a nice long list, a growing list during the school year. It will grow because things happen, of course, right? A growing list of sections and topics that we want to cover into the yearbook this year. And then this is the part that many yearbook staffs just never really get to. And it's about the stories. All right, think about a yearbook. We have the sections, we have the topics in those sections, but then we have the stories as part of those topics. This is what most yearbook staffs do not do. And hopefully you're watching this video, you're going to start to do that this year, next year, whenever you're watching this video. You're going to start to do that into the future because it's going to make your yearbook so amazing, the best you've ever done, truly, because now we're telling people stories, not just doing the bare minimum. All right, keep in mind, what do people want in the yearbook? Well, we've done lots of surveys over the years of students, and of course the number one thing is students say, I want to be in it. Not just my headshot in the portrait section. Everybody gets one of those. I want to be in this thing. I want a story told. I want a quote shared. I want some candid photo of me doing something cool put into the yearbook. Stories about people or maybe small groups. That's what people really want to see in their yearbook. Again, not the bare minimum, not the usual people over and over again. As many different people as we can, because every single person in your school has some story to tell, stories to tell, and they'd like to be remembered. And it's not nearly as difficult as you might think. Again, this could be about one person, literally one person. It could be about a group of people. It could be about a large group of people. But it's beyond just the usual sections and topics that get covered pretty much in every yearbook every year. All right, so let's do a student activity once again. Hopefully, pad and pen, you got something there at your end, okay? I want you to take a look at your list. I'm assuming you made a section and topic list. You've got it in front of you. I want you to pick one topic from that list and then think about, as a group, what stories you could tell as part of that topic. All right, here's a quick example, all right? I love sports. Pick a sports team at your school. One team, football, volleyball, wrestling, whatever. Pick a team. And then as a group, all right, we'll go for maybe about a minute and a half here. As a group, what are some individual stories that come to mind right away as part of that topic, as part of that team? And again, some examples, star players of the team, they have stories to tell. Maybe if it's a high school, you got some freshman kid, this kid's a phenom, man, he's really good, or she's really good. All right, what about that particular person? Something about your coach. You have a big rival game against your next door neighbor's school. There's probably always a story involved there, isn't it? Okay. What are the stories that you could tell about this particular topic? Doesn't have to be a sport. As a group, pick a topic, and then for about a minute and a half, brainstorm all the individual story ideas you can immediately think of as part of that topic. Minute and a half or so. If you find yourself going along, hit that pause button, keep on going. All right, ready, set, go. All right, let me jump back in here. Now, hopefully you got on a roll. Okay, again, if you want to pause me and keep going, that's fine. But when we get to the end of this lesson video in just a bit, you can kind of pick up where you left off. And then what to do is look at all the topics on your list. What are all the different kind of story angles that immediately come to mind as part of each one of those topics? And of course, again, this grows over the course of a year, either because things happen or you find out something, hey, I didn't know about that about that person. I didn't know about that story. So you're going to be adding to this over time, all the time. That's perfectly normal. So after the lesson video is over, go to each one of those topics and start attaching those different story angles that you can immediately come up with. Now, let me go to my favorite here again. And we mentioned this back in the part 1 video, academics, which almost never gets covered in most yearbooks. And yet, guys, come on, that's the whole reason you go to school, all right? For that 8 to 3 part, what do you actually do in your classes? I bet there are tons of great stories to be told as part of academics at your school. So let's do another quick student activity. What I want you to do here as a group, I want you to pick one academic subject. Let's say science. All right, you're going to pick science. So the idea is, how are we going to cover science in the yearbook this year? First off, think about, okay, who's our science teachers? You know, hopefully you have more than one. How many of them? And maybe they have certain specialties and so on, certain grade levels probably, right? All right, so think about all of them. And then from that, what are some story angles you can immediately think of when it comes to science at your school and what your science teachers do in their different classes? I know there are a lot of interesting stories, either serious stories, could be funny stories, any kind of story that you can immediately think of. It could be science, social studies, English, math. You pick the subject, and then again, we'll take about a minute and a half. What are some story angles you can immediately think of as part of that subject? All right, ready, set, go. All right, jumping back in. Once again, if you're rolling, hit the pause button if you want. Otherwise, do it when we get to the end of the video in just a few minutes. But hopefully you have a whole lot of interesting academic story ideas. You might say, man, we've never covered these in the yearbook before. Are they worthy? Absolutely. And so hopefully that list gets a lot longer with things that you know or things that you discover as part of the different academic subjects of your yearbook. Now let's move on to something else which is a little unusual. What are some unusual story ideas that you can immediately think of that are worthy of coverage in the yearbook? Now, these may not be connected with a certain section, all right? It just might be some interesting story about some person. Something happened to them, they did something, and so on, that maybe isn't directly connected with some particular section of your book. And it could be anything, all right? It could be something new at your school. It could be something new in your town. It could be COVID. Remember COVID? Yeah. A lot of story angles from that one, right? Could be trends. Maybe there's some hot trend going on right now that is, a lot of teens are doing this or affected by it and so on. Well, there's one, okay. What are people talking about? In other words, opinion pieces. Maybe there's some hot issue right now in your area, in your state, across the country, in the world, and we want to go around getting people's opinions, quotes, and stories as we tell the big story of, here's what people of our school think about this subject. And by the way, yes, sometimes controversial subjects are okay to put into the yearbook. Why? Because people are talking about them this year. They're important. And so many years from now, when people pull this year's yearbook off the shelf and they're looking through it, oh yeah, I remember that topic. Oh, that was really hot that year. Maybe not in the future, but that year, ooh, that was a big one. Topics, opinions, and quotes. People love that stuff in their yearbooks. So once again, let's take a brief break, maybe a minute on this one, and then we'll keep going. Really quick, can you think of some unusual or different story ideas that just kind of pop into your head involving a certain student, a group, the school, the town, whatever, that you could cover in the yearbook this year? Start writing, all right? Ready, set, go. All right, jump back in. All right, now hopefully that was an interesting discussion, right? All right, you all have your friends and classmates and so on. Hey, the person does something unusual, or hey, this person does a really cool hobby, not directly connected to any particular section of your book, but still something worthy of being covered and remembered in the book. Now, let me briefly mention, all right, the Jostens Yearbook Avenue page ladder for the 23-24 school year, the new page ladder, everybody's going to be using it, and I really love this new page ladder because it has a tab there for sections, so you list your sections in there and then drag and drop them on the pages for that section, but they have a tab for topics, and you can make that topic list as long as you want and then just drag and drop them onto the pages that those story topics are going to go on. So a particular page might have a list of story topics that you plan to cover on that page or on that spread. I love the new page ladder. It is awesome and it kind of fits in with our storytelling theme. So have fun using the page ladder on Yearbook Avenue. All right, now next up, assignments. We've got this long list of sections, topics, and stories. Now we have to cover them. And so the question is, who's going to do that? This is an area where a lot of people, they get their big eyes like, that's a lot of work. Again, not as much as you might think. It's all about organization and planning. You've got your group, either a lot of people or a few people. And the idea is essentially you're going to figure out first, okay, what stories are we going to put into the yearbook this year? And keep in mind, you may have a giant list. There's no way you're ever going to put them all in there. You just don't have the room. That's okay. That's normal. Better to have too long a list than too short a list, and then you're like, what do we put in the rest of this space? That's never a good thing. If your list is too long, that's good. And keep in mind, again, as the year goes on, the school year goes on, that list is only going to get longer because things happen, things change, things you didn't consider or even think about suddenly show up. You put them on the list. All right, not a problem. Long list is actually a good thing. But who's going to do what? And I think it's important. You've got stories and photos. First off, keep in mind, this is a yearbook. Whenever possible, we want photos. Even if it's just a headshot of a person next to their quote, we always want to get photos as best we can tied in to all the different stories that we tell. We are doing a yearbook. We're not writing a novel here, all right? No, 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 no. We're doing a yearbook. But still, stories come first. Photos, I think, come second. All right, so in other words, if you're covering a sports team, yeah, you go to their games and take pictures, right? The story came first, the photos came second. Sometimes people kind of mix that up, I think. They just kind of go out and take random photos and then bring them back and then they're, okay, what do we do with all these? If you lead with stories like, we want to cover this, let's go get photos connected with this, perfect. Start with the story, follow with the photos, and of course the information that goes along with that story. So we're not going to do an activity here. When we're done here in just a couple of minutes, when you start to figure out your assignments of who's going to cover what, who's going to track down what stories, then at that point you can start to figure out the additional stuff. All right, so that you'll handle that after this video is concluded. Now there's an old saying in yearbook, and actually in design pretty much across the board, magazines and all sorts of different things. And it's the line is, content drives design. In other words, gather content first, then figure out how it's going to look on pages second. Now sometimes we kind of flip those around. And it could be because we really don't have much time for yearbook. We're on a short time schedule. So we're going to put a bunch of page templates down, just kind of randomly, and then we're going to try to fit our stuff into them. I understand that situation perfectly. If you're really pressed for time, you still want to make a good book, maybe that's what you do. And there's nothing wrong with that. But whenever you can, content first, design second. So depending on the information and photos, whatever you gather about a particular topic or even a particular story, that'll determine how you're going to design it on the yearbook page. Content first, design second. Keep that in mind as you continue your work. Now finally, hopefully you're already doing this, but I see this too often again in too many yearbooks. The same people get covered over and over and over again. Maybe some of you. The very active kids, the very popular students, you know, the folks that are in a lot of things. They're on 2 or 3 sports teams. They're on student council. They're on the yearbook club. They're in this other club. They're in some other effort. You know, the really active students. Now, first off, that's awesome. It'd be great if everybody was that active. But of course, they're not, right? However, does that mean all those other people don't deserve to be covered in the yearbook? Of course they deserve it. Everybody deserves to be covered in the yearbook. So if you have a lot of different story topics on your list, that is your best chance to cover as many different people as you can. Because again, we mentioned, I think at the very, very beginning of this series, what do people want to see in the yearbook? They want to see themselves, and they want to have themselves covered somehow in the book. That's our ultimate goal here, as best as we can do it, cover as many different people as possible. So it may not just be which people are going to cover in the book, it's much more of a how many people are we going to cover in the book this year. Once again, for Jostens, we've always had the magic number 3. How many times can we picture people 3 times in the yearbook? 3 or more. That's always been sort of our gold standard. How many people can get covered at least 3 times in the book? Now that could be 3 pictures. It could be maybe 2 pictures and a quote with their name attached, obviously. Okay, well that's 3. Hopefully more than 3. So make that part of your challenge as you go through your stories. Not just the same people over and over. How many different people can we cover with our storytelling this year? And again, guys, keep in mind, when we say telling a story, a lot of folks, again, think about a novel, like reams of writing. Well, that's one way to tell a story. But if for the yearbook, no, there are so many different ways. You can tell a story about a person with their quote, about some hot topic or something. You can tell a story with a picture and a caption. And the picture doesn't have to be big, and the caption might only be 2 lines. But by doing that on some page of your book, you have now told somebody's story. Preferably more than just the picture. Add that caption right there. with at least a couple lines of information identifying who is this person, what's going on in this photo, and a little bit of background about whatever the story topic is involving that person and that photo. Not hard to do, but so valuable when it comes to a terrific yearbook effort. So, okay, we're going to stop right here. We're done. You have your plan. A growing plan of story ideas that go way beyond the norm, covering as many different people as we can. How are we going to divide up the work to make sure that we get good coverage to everything and everybody and have a lot of fun doing it? You are now probably making the most valuable yearbook maybe in the history of your school simply because you have determined we're going to tell people stories. This isn't a yearbook. This is now a story book. And by the way, if you ever need any help, contact your Jocelyn's representative. That's what we do. We think it would be fun to really see what you can do with this interesting idea. Thanks for watching.